I think Excel gets a pretty bad rap from the data analytics end of things. Where BDAA is known for saying if it doesn't fit into Excel, it's not big data, which I don't disagree with, but that doesn't mean that it's totally useless. I don't like, in the real world, you're not always going to be working with big data. You might be working with some subset or just a smaller project. And that's where Excel can be pretty helpful. And I'll also show a tool called Power Query, which is good for big data. So I just wanted to throw that in there because you've probably heard that before. So what is Excel good for? I like Excel a lot just for like trying to understand your data before you start a big project. It's really easy to see the layout, understand your rows and columns. It's also along the same lines really good for EDA. So again, just trying to get to know your data, clean it up a little bit before you do some deep analysis. And then again, as I mentioned, Power Query is a great data connectivity tool. So when you have those bigger data sets or data that is going to continuously be updated, and Excel might not be good enough on its own, this is a great tool to use. So I am going to send a link in the chat. 1 second. Stop share real quick. Okay, so if everyone can go to this link, download it as an Excel file so you can follow along with me as I walk through different data tools that I use. And this is what you should be seeing once it's all downloaded. So our data is set up. These are food inspections in Chicago. I believe it's 2016. So we have inspection ID, and this is all information on different inspections, and then the inspection ID. But then we don't have these tied to specific restaurants, so that's where the restaurant info tab comes in. And then these are more specific information about the actual restaurant that the inspection was done on. So there's our data, our raw data. And then I copy and pasted a couple rows from the restaurant info tab into page 1. And this is where we're going to be doing a little bit of work. We want to join some information from both of these tabs. And if you've worked with SQL or other programs, you're probably familiar with joining data. And how we do that in Excel is with a VLOOKUP. So I have inspection ID, name, and facility type. But we want to pull in, say, risk. Oh, also, I'll go over here. I have tasks. So just so you can follow along what we're going to be doing if you get lost or need to go back and do anything. So we're going to pull in risk into this page so we have a little more information about the inspections. So what we do is VLOOKUP, so you can follow along if you'd like. VLOOKUP, and then the first thing we enter is the lookup value. And you want your lookup value to be a key is what it's called. It's a unique value that we can find in both of our data sets. So in this case, it's our inspection ID, because say if we were to try to do it on name, there might be multiple Chipotles in the data, and that would kind of, oh, there's another one. But that would throw things off. So we want to look up on the inspection ID. And then this table array is where we want to pull the information from. So where's the risk column? It's in the food inspections. So we're going to go over, you can just click on the tab and it puts it into the formula. And you want to make sure you grab all of your data. And so how I do this is I click on the start of the data, and then if you hit Control Shift down, or on a Mac, I think it's Command Shift down, it pans to the end of your data. So you can see we have about 25,000 rows. And then you do the same thing to go over for columns. So Control Shift over selects all of your data. And you can see all of this in the equation bar at the top. So once we have all of our data selected, you put a comma to indicate that you're on to the next part of the equation. And then the next part is our column index. So what column we want to grab. In our case, it's risk. And then indexing in Excel begins at 1. So we're going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is the risk column. So we're going to put a 5. And then this range lookup is whether you want an exact or approximate match. Honestly, I have never put true here. I've always wanted an exact match. So I always put false. If you run into a situation where you need true, let me know. I'm very curious, but that's that formula. You just hit enter and there we have it. And so now we probably want to carry this formula down. But I will show you if we were to just drag this down one, you can see that if you look up here in like the formula bar, it changes our data range. So A1 and A1 is not included anymore in our data set, which we want it to be. We want our data range to stay the same every time we're trying to pull or look up a value. So how we lock a cell in Excel is the $sign. So if we put a $sign around this whole range, both the row and the column, we'll lock that range, and then I'll delete that. And then as I copy this formula down, you can just double click the green box. It copies down the formula, and this our inspection IDs are changing, which is what we want, but our lookup data range is not changing. So that's exactly what we want. Everyone good? Is this good so far? Okay, if so, I'm gonna give you guys a minute to do the same thing. Oh, just kidding. I didn't look at the tasks myself. I'm gonna do it one more time for results, and then we're gonna do breakout rooms for you guys to do your own column. So, so same thing, if I were to copy this formula over, we get NA. And okay, so we are trying to look up F2, which is Chipotle, in that range, and it's getting confused. So same. We need to lock the E here because we want to keep it looking up on inspection ID before we drag it over. But be careful, we don't want to lock the 2, because if you lock the 2, then when you drag the formula down, it's never going to look up the rest of the inspection IDs. So if we lock E before we drag this over, that works, right? But it's still pulling in risk. So if we look over here, all we need to do is change our index. And now our index is 6 rather than 5. So we change this to a 6 and copy it down. And there we have it. So that is all for VLOOKUPs. They're honestly pretty easy. A couple other things I'll note is as you can probably see, our inspection IDs are already in order for this food inspection and restaurant tabs, but it doesn't need to be that way. Your inspection IDs can be in any order and the lookup will still work. And the other thing I'll note is if you happen to have two of the same keys, which shouldn't be if you have good data, but if you do, it will give you the first result that shows up that it finds. So if this inspection ID were like here, it would give you the value it looks up first for risk, which would be 1. The next thing I just wanted to show you, I feel like most people who have used Excel before know this, but it's insanely helpful. So if you don't, it takes 2 seconds just to filter your columns. If, again, just like getting to know your data, if you just go to data filter, it adds little arrows. And then I think I said to filter by Chipotle. So if we just wanted to see like, I don't know, tried to look at a pattern to see, you know, how well Chipotle does on their inspections, we can just like go here and filter by Chipotle, maybe. There we go. And again, you would, if you were like actually doing a data project on this, you would probably want to group all of these different Chipotles. But if we just want that one, we can maybe just look at this and try to find some kind of pattern. But yeah, again, just a quick, useful tool if you didn't already know what was there. So I'll undo that. And I think that's all I had for this page. So let's pop on over to page 2. And here we're going to make some pivot tables. So pivot tables are awesome if you've never used them before. There's so many different ways to use them, but it's so easy to get a better look at your data. So let's just dive right in. Actually, I'm not even going to try to explain it more. So the first thing I'm going to do is insert pivot table. And this little box comes up. And what you want to do is grab your data that you want it to read off of. So in our case, we want it to read off of the data that we pulled in the VLOOKUP exercise. So that's going to be in page 1. And then we're going to do that same Control-Shift down trick to grab all of our data and Control-Shift over to grab all of the columns, hit OK, and it brings in a pivot table. And it brings it in wherever your mouse was. So if you wanted it to look prettier, I guess I should have had my mouse over here to start, but here we go. We get this little box. And I think here in the task, you can see what I said to do. So first, we're going to make a pivot table to show the percent of pass with conditions pass and fail for bakery, grocery store, long-term care, and restaurant. So first, we want the percent, which is the value, and those are in the results. So we're going to drag result into value. And you can see it already pops up with the count, which is not what we want ultimately, but it does it automatically. And then we also want to see those as columns. So I'm going to drag results into columns as well. So it makes this little table for us. Now we don't want to see all of these. I said we only want to see pass with conditions, pass, and fail. So we are going to filter, and all I did was click this little arrow. There's a couple different places you can do it. I think this is easiest, and we're just gonna click these 3, hit OK, and there we have that. And then we want to see this for different facility types. So we're going to make facility type rows. Now, this is a lot, right? Like this on its own doesn't really tell you all too much. So we are going to filter by bakery, grocery, grocery store, long-term care. Oh, I passed it. There's restaurant and long-term care. Hit OK, and that looks a lot nicer. Now, looking at this pivot table, you can probably get a lot out of this, but percentages might mean a little more. So to get different values to show up in the table, we're going to click on the count of results little arrow in the values, and then value field settings, and then show values as, and then no calculation. So that was a lot of steps, but we're in the values, show value as, and then where it says no calculation, we're going to want percent of row total, and that will give us the percent of how many like bakeries pass versus fail versus pass with conditions. So there you go, and you can see in the grand total that everything adds up to 100, so that's a good check. So these are pretty cool, you know, just looking at these. We don't see any, or at least I don't see anything too significant. Everything looks pretty similar, which is probably a good sign. There's not like a significant amount of, you know, restaurants failing or anything like that. But these numbers don't really look too pretty. So what we're going to do is you can make some pretty cool charts out of these. So if you just stay here, it's in the Pivot Analyze add-on. You just click Pivot Chart, and it brings up all these options. And these are a lot of fun to play around with. But I believe in the instructions I said make a stacked bar chart. So that is this second one. So if we just click on it, it makes it for you. Hit OK. And there you have it, is your stacked bar chart that displays this information. So the other really cool thing about this is that you can change this information super, super easily, and it adds it to the chart. So let's just say like, oh, I want to see how assisted living does. Okay. And then it just adds it. And that's actually pretty interesting. They pass more often, which is probably a good sign. And you could do the same thing with results, you know. So it's really fun to play around with, and then everything updates instantly. So like I said, it's pretty fun for EDA, getting to know your data, cleaning stuff up, etc. Okay, so that was the demo. Make some fun charts because this stuff is pretty fun to play around with. All right. This next little bit, you guys don't have the data set that I'm gonna use for this. So if you've been following along this far, great, thank you. I hope you learned something, but this is Power Query is what I want to show you, and I just want to show it to you so you know it's out there. But sometimes it takes a little while to load, so it's not worth having everyone do it on their own. But okay, so Power Query is Microsoft's data connectivity tool. So, and it's good for data preparation. So what's good about it is that you can save import formats. So say you have data sets from a bunch of different years maybe, but they're in different files. You can save the way you import one file, and you can import it the same way for the next year's file, or you can merge the files together or append them onto each other. So merging data, updating data, it's all very, very easy in Power Query. It also changes with the data source, which you may already be familiar with, but you know, like this restaurant info, that's not going to change. Like that's just in a tab. and we're messing around with it. But if you're using Power Query and you change the source of your data or the file it links to, it will also update. And so will all of your calculated rows and all of that. So it's just really, really nice. It makes it comparable to like R and Python. So that is great. And the one last thing I need to throw in there is no row limit with Power Query. So that's the bad rap Excel gets. It's not big data if it fits into Excel, but it is big data if it's, or it could be big data. Big data can fit in Power Query. So just needed to throw that out there. But I'll show you how it works. So you just go to this get data. There's all different import formats. Mine's from a file. So I'm just going to hit from file. We'll leave it to CSV. Ignore my sloppy desktop and many, many files I have. Here we are. So this is the CSV of all of the combined data. And here we go. You get this box to pop up. You may be familiar with this from other programs when you import data, but you can change your delimiter. Ours is a CSV, so it's a comma. And then it shows you a little snippet of your data, but it's not everything, obviously. What I want to do is show you this transform data button down here. So if I click it, it brings up a different window. You can see Power Query Editor. So this is not all of our data. This is just some of it. It gives you a little snapshot. And you can mess around with this and play with it. Whatever you change in here, though, will be applied to the rest of your data. Another thing I want to point out is this applied steps. So whenever you make a change, like let's say, I don't know, I don't like this called AKA name. I just think that's weird. So if I want to rename this, I can, just call it name. There we go. And it added a step for me. Well, let's say, never mind, I realize there's a DBA name. So we probably need to make these sure that they're different. We don't want to call them both name. Get rid of the step, it goes right back. So it's really, really easy to make changes to your data, but also go back to a particular point in time if you happen to catch something that may have been a mistake or something like that. So you can pan through this. This is all the data. It's a lot. Another thing I want to show you is the advanced editor. So actually, let's redo that. Let's just call this name again. So we added this step, but say like we wanted to rename all of these. Personally, when I've imported data before where these will just come up. It happened to be the source of data I was working with, but these just come up as like column 1, column 2, column 3. And you don't want to have to like sit there and right click, rename all of them. So instead, what you can do is go into the advanced editor and it brings up the code, which is awesome. Because for example, if I wanted to change this to a different data source, but keep the format the same, I could do that very easily. There's just a lot more that you can change in the code than you can like trying to click on buttons and stuff like that. So for example, here's our renamed column line. The code's there. You just have to read it and figure out what you need to do. So renamed columns, change type, aka name turns to name. Awesome. Let's say we want it to be called, I don't know, second name because there was a name before. It'll just do that for you. So Again, there's so much more you can do with this, more than I can show you in the remaining 13 minutes, but if you get the chance to play with Power Query, I highly encourage it. It's an awesome tool. It's definitely underhyped. You can do calculated columns. You can do basically anything you would want to in here. But what we're going to do now is load our data. So if I hit close and load, it brings it to a new sheet, and it does take a second to load. There we go. So it prints it out nice and pretty, loaded to the sheet. You can change the colors. It's a table, so it's easy to read. And I do want to point out, you can do all the same calculations and stuff that you would do in a normal Excel sheet in here. So like if I wanted to do some sort of, I don't know, VLOOKUP in here, it adds that row, and then I would just do like I don't know. I won't bore you with another VLOOKUP, but it would automatically apply it to all of the rows without even having to like double click it or anything. So this is what Excel made for big data. And I really like it. I'll bring this back up. If you showed up late, please sign in. But just so you know how much Excel can do, here in the chat, I will send just a little, if I can find it. Here we go. Here's a link to all the Excel functions. So check them out. I don't know probably half of them, you know, like there's so many, but just to make the point that Excel can probably do what you want it to do, despite being overshadowed by a bunch of newer technologies. But it really is a great tool for data and data analysis. So if anything, that's what I want you to pull out of this workshop. And now I will end it there, but I will stay on, chat, have questions. Feel free to ask.